Traore King, Inclusion Support Officer and today's presenter. Daphne, over to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Karen. Thank you to Nobi. So welcome everyone to today's little training session, the little webinar, if you're going to watch it later. It's titled Beyond Business, Best Practices on Inclusive Leadership and Unmasking Mental Health in the Workplace. So, already know this session is brought to you by No Beep. So thank you to the organizers for having me. Now, I will mention that an accessibility best practice that we're going to be following throughout this little session is just giving verbal descriptions of the pictures we use. So pictured on the screen here are outlined silhouettes of stick people in the color of a rainbow, showing diversity through a multitude of colors and abilities. Okay. Now at the bottom of the screen here are two logos, one of the Government of Canada and the other of Collège Boreal. So just to give a little bit of context and some background about who we are, I'm just going to share with you our project objective. So the Inclusivity Works project, funded by Employment and Social Development of Canada, aims to be able to equip employers such as yourselves with the knowledge, the skills, as well as the resources that are needed to be able to recruit, welcome, and support employees with disabilities. So we achieve this through awareness activities, additional supports. This is something that's kind of catered and based off of your unique needs, because again, our goal is to be able to give you the right tools to create a more diverse and inclusive workplace, focusing on strengthening opportunities, accessibility, and equity for individuals, especially those with disabilities. So just a quick little introduction of myself. For those of you that may not know me, and pictured on the screen here is an image of myself. I have brown skin, curly hair, and in the picture I am wearing a pale pink blazer. The text on this slide illustrates my name, Daphne Traore King, as Karen already introduced me. I am the Inclusion Support Officer for the Northern Ontario region of the Inclusivity Works project, and you can find me on LinkedIn. So hello to everyone, and thank you for joining us today. So this session is just divided into two parts here. And just under 40 minutes, we're going to take a look at best practices on inclusive leadership, as I mentioned, specifically looking at inclusive language and some of the things listed on screen here, giving clear instructions. And then the second part is going to be focusing on mental health in the workplace. So on this slide, we can see a number of multicolored people icons in the shape of a heart, and the title reads Inclusive Language. So it is very important to use inclusive language. It's about choosing words that are able to make everyone feel welcome as well as respected. This means we want to avoid terms that could unintentionally exclude certain people, right? So for example, instead of saying salesman, which may seem a little bit, outdated or gender specific, you could just simply use sales representative, right? So these changes, they just want to ensure, for example, that your job titles are neutral and don't have any unintended bias, for example. By choosing your words carefully, you actually help to create a space where everyone feels comfortable, they feel included. It's not just about being polite, it's about making sure that all candidates and employees within your businesses, regardless of their background, feel like they can actually be themselves at work. So when writing your job postings, perhaps your web content or any kind of work paper documents that you might have, think about how your language might be perceived. Using inclusive language really helps to make your workplace more welcoming and equitable for everyone, not just your employees, but also for your clients as well. So on this slide here, we see three people sitting and kind of standing in front of a giant whiteboard with text bubbles above their head. So to develop the principle or the first principle of accessible communication and using plain language, this is what this next section is going to talk about. So as we strive to kind of create an inclusive and accessible workplace, the use of plain language, for example, in job postings or the policies that you have that you're setting up in your business, the documents that you're going to be using and anything related to the business, even emails that you send, right? It's a really crucial step. So this just means writing in a way that is clear, straightforward, and easy to understand. You kind of want to avoid, any kind of complex jargon, long sentences. This approach instead is able to ensure that all candidates, employees, your clients that you're interacting with, including those with disabilities or those for whom English or French is not their first language, can also easily grasp the information that you're trying to share and disseminate. For example, you can think about the difference between a complex statement and a plain language statement. So in a job posting, let's say, instead of saying, the candidate must possess exceptional problem skills or problem solving skills and demonstrate the ability to navigate complex scenarios with strategic foresight and precision, you could kind of summarize that, simplify it, and just say, we need someone who can solve problems effectively and handle tricky situations with clear thinking and good planning, right? So by using plain language, you make your content more accessible to a wider audience as well. So this simple approach helps ensure that, again, all potential candidates joining your team, all current employees that are already on your team, or the clients have an equal opportunity to be able to understand and use the information that you're disseminating, therefore, being able to foster a more inclusive and effective environment. So now on the right side of the screen here is kind of an image of a cartoon woman holding a clipboard. So many people benefit from clear and detailed instructions, especially in the workplace and when being given new tasks and new roles for the first time, let's say. So we're going to look at how to give clear instructions. First, you want to be specific. So your instructions should include all the relevant details. For example, instead of just referring to a document by name, maybe even put the link of the location of the document that's on your server. Instead of just saying, enter the data on the spreadsheet, maybe even specify the column that you're looking to have the information be added to. Next, you want to break it down. So don't assume that the employee will be able to kind of fill in the gaps themselves or even the client, right? If you're filling out a client form, for example, you want to outline everything that needs to be done, that needs to be filled out, and kind of like a step-by-step process. Next, you want to look at being quite literal, right? You want to avoid colloquialisms, sarcasm, jokes in your instructions, if that's there. And you want to write it down. So, don't rely solely on verbal instructions. Written instructions can be very helpful as well. And then lastly, you want to connect it back to the bigger picture. So explain how the tasks, the processes kind of fit together. Don't assume that just because you said how to do something in one situation that the person will then apply that knowledge in another, right? So explain when something is like a standard policy. Okay, so let's see some rules about inclusive language that I have listed on the slide here, 1 through 6. So number 1 is people first. For example, instead of referring to somebody as a blind woman or a saleswoman, we could just put the person first part of the sentence and just say a woman that is blind or a woman on our sales teams, if that's how they identify, right? And I just want to mention that this is not specifically the case in regards to autistic people. For autistic people, they prefer identity first language. So you wouldn't say people with autism, you would stick with autistic people, but this is still a general good practice rule for just about everything else. So rule number 2, using universal expressions. So using universal language means avoiding confusing terms. For example, we have lots of little sayings. We'll say, let's get the ball rolling. When you could just say, we're going to start the project rather than saying learn the ropes or something to those means. You would just say familiarize yourself with the process instead. Rule number 3 here is to consider the impact of mental health stigma, and we're going to talk about that in the next section. But it's important to recognize mental health conditions in inclusive language. So terms like bipolar, PTSD, OCD, ADHD are real mental health diagnoses that people actually have, right? So using them to kind of describe everyday behaviors really goes to minimize the impact of a person's experience with a mental condition. So for example, people saying, I'm so OCD about how my office is organized, when you could just say that you like to keep your office organized. Or if you like to refer to the weather as being bipolar, you can simply just say that the weather is unpredictable. So rule number 4 here is to use gender neutral language. So again, instead of using, guys or girls to address a group of people, which is typically gendered language, a more inclusive option would refer to the group of people as maybe folks, or the team, the clients, right? Number 5 here is about imagery, right? So imagery plays a key role in attracting job seekers, in attracting your clients as well, who value diversity and inclusion. I mean, that's the number one reason why lots of people shop at Sephora, for example. They have great imagery for their diversity, right? Great collaborations. So that's why the images you choose for your website, whether that be promotional materials, any ads as well, should reflect a diverse and inclusive work environment. But it's also important to kind of back up what you're trying to represent, right? So you can do that with using inclusive language and not just have inclusive pictures, right? And then lastly, rule number 6 here is ask. Ask if you're unsure. And this is kind of like the most important question, a really important rule that can also take priority. So it's important to consider asking the person first if you're unsure, for example, by asking them how to pronounce their names or their preferred pronouns. It's better to not assume and to just simply ask them. Most people are happy to be asked and will just simply, explain to you and leave it at that, right? Inclusive language really aims to kind of put the person first rather than the other dimensions of their identity that may generally marginalize them. So most people, again, like I said, are going to be happy to explain to you the descriptive language that would allow them to feel properly recognized and respected. So on the screen here, there are black icons, one representing kind of like a prohibition symbol indicating language not to be used, and the other kind of like a thumbs up gesture indicating a like representing appropriate language. So we're going to talk about some expressions that are still, too often used, which may seem redundant, but they also reinforce hurtful or stigmatizing stereotypes, especially in relation to mental health or disability specifically. So a few examples here, he's crazy. So this expression reduces a person to a stereotype and perpetuates the idea that mental health conditions are, kind of synonymous with madness or dangerousness, right? So a better way to say it would be, he lives with mental health condition. And this is when you're actually referring to a person, right? The next example, that's crazy. When we use crazy in this sense, it's to kind of describe an event or a situation, and we're trivializing this word and indirectly the realities of the people living with a mental health condition, right? So instead, we could just say it's unbelievable, that's ridiculous, because that's really what you're trying to say. That's what you mean. Next, we have you're so OCD, right? So this expression, again, you're kind of using it just casually to describe neatness or organization, and it kind of misinterprets the obsessive compulsive disorder, right? So instead, you can just try you're really detail oriented or you're really organized. Next example we have here is when referencing someone, she is so bipolar, right? So again, the sentence defines a person solely by their diagnosis. Instead, you could just say, she lives with a bipolar condition. And the next example, the temperature is so bipolar. Or even if you were to say she is bipolar and you're calling this person bipolar, even though they're not, but you're referencing that they are because they can switch from one mood to another, let's say, and you're just using that term just like that. Again, the use of this just kind of hijacks the serious medical term to describe the person or to describe objects or phenomena in this case. So you could simply just say that the temperature is, unpredictable. So the goal here is not to be too politically correct, but to kind of just show attention, respect, and not to perpetuate false or hurtful ideas, right? Words have an impact, and choosing inclusive language is kind of a concrete way to be able to include everyone. So a couple more examples that we're going to go through a little quickly here. He is disabled. So rather than saying that, we could just say he lives with a disability. Rather than saying he's paranoid, we can say he shows anxiety. rather than referring to a group of people, let's say by calling them the deaf or, hard of hearing, we can say these people who are deaf or hard of hearing, right? They're still people first. Rather than the expression, she went crazy, we could just say she reacted strongly to the situation, right? And this one's a notable example within the workplace. And then another one here is that meeting was insane. So we could just say that the meeting was really intense, that it was chaotic, right? So to kind of conclude this little section here on inclusive language, we want to remember that our communication choices have a direct impact on inclusion, right? Every word, every image, every tool we use can actually make a difference. So by integrating the principles of accessibility and respect into our daily communications, we're able to create a more open, more humane, and more effective environment. So don't be afraid to ask questions, to kind of review your practices and go back and correct yourself. And above all, you want to also be sure to surround yourself with concerned people to guide you as well, because inclusion is an ongoing process and it starts with each and every one of us, especially those of you who are entrepreneurs and you're the boss, right? So moving on into our mental health section. So displayed on the screen here is kind of a black and white image of three heads, one that includes kind of like a low battery symbol, the other that hosts the symbol of a thunderstorm, and then the last one that includes kind of like a melee chord. So according to the World Health Organization, mental health is a state of well-being that allows us to face the challenges of everyday life, realize our potential, learn, work effectively, and contribute to community life. So mental health is not just about the absence of illness. It is an integral part of our overall health and well-being. It's influenced by many factors. So again, like the work environment, the social relationships you have, your lifestyle, so like your sleep, your diet, anything like that, personal history, access to care, and even the socioeconomic situation as well. So we're going to talk about mental health conditions. Just kind of list a few of them: depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, even OCD can be considered mental health as well. But so these conditions can kind of manifest as changes in the way that we think, that we feel, or that we act. They can create obstacles in our daily lives, so difficulty concentrating, loss of interest in certain activities, social isolation, or great emotional fatigue. So these changes can be visible to the person concerned, but they're also to their loved ones. And it's important to know that it's possible to live with a mental health condition and thrive simultaneously, especially when you have access to the right supports. So a healthy workplace can support mental health just as a stressful or disorganized climate can harm it, right? So that's why it's really important to consider both personal and structural factors. And lastly, I want to note that it should be remembered that mental health is a fundamental human right, right? It's essential for our personal development, but also for the social and economic development of our communities. So displayed on the screen here is kind of an image of a graph illustrating the spectrum of the dual continuum of mental health that was developed by Corey Keyes. So everyone has mental health. Each individual can understand mental health in their own way, and according to cultural background as well can play a role. It can be helpful to think of mental health though as kind of like a spectrum or like this sort of continuum. So on the one hand, there is good mental health. On the other, there's kind of a more serious, precarious mental health. We all move along this continuum, probably back and forth. We all struggle with poor mental health at times, depending on what's going on in our lives, and again, many other factors. So I also want to add that not everyone lives with a mental illness, which, like mental health, can also fluctuate. On the one side of the continuum, there's the absence of a diagnosable mental illness, so minimal or no symptoms. And then on the other side is serious mental illness. So for this reason, mental health and mental illness are actually two kind of distinct concepts, but they can overlap. It is a double continuum on which we all evolve. Okay, so displayed on the screen here are four icons, one of a clock, one of a diverse kind of crowd. We have icons of two stick people, and then a graphic with like a money symbol and an arrow pointing downwards. So why do we care about mental health in the workplace? So employers have a legal duty to take all reasonable precautions to prevent injury and illness. And as entrepreneurs for your own businesses, you're the employer, so you have this duty as well. So again, this responsibility would include the management of any risks, work-related factors within your business that would lead to psychological injuries and or illness. And it's important to include yourself when you're developing this as well, right? So on average, a person spends about 90,000 hours at work in their lifetime. And this can represent 3,750 days in a lifetime compared to the 368 days that we typically spend to socialize with friends, right? So most of our lives we're working. 500,000 Canadians miss work every week due to mental health issues. Next statistic is 1 in 2 adults has had or will have a mental health problem by the age of 40. And then the last statistic here is $51 billion is what is the annual economic burden of mental illness in Canada. So to kind of go over some more statistics and highlights, according to research from Deloitte Canada, companies that have been investing in mental health programs for more than 3 years can actually see a return on their investment of up to $6 for every dollar spent, right? So kind of like a 6-to-1 profit ratio. Now, another one here, the second one on the screen here is the burden of mental illness and addiction problems in Ontario is 1.5 times higher than all cancers combined, and more than 7 times that of all infectious diseases combined as well, which is quite high. The third highlight we have here is that the average cost of leave to the employer is $18,000, which is more than twice the amount of physical injuries. The fourth highlight here is only 23% of people feel comfortable sharing their problems at work. The second to last highlight is that 45% of survey respondents indicated that managers or supervisors within their organizations play a role in promoting and supporting mental health in the workplace through programs, policies, and other initiatives. So if you are entrepreneurs, if you manage other employees, just know that you have a great big impact on your employees and your colleagues' mental health as well in the workplace. And then the last one here, just that mental health and addiction issues are the leading causes of disability in Canada and around the world. So on the screen here is an image of multiple silhouettes of a head in various colors of pink, blue, green, and yellow. So among the most common mental health conditions, there is anxiety, which includes phobias, social anxiety, generalized anxiety disorder, and difficulties related to panic, and even agoraphobia, right? People may also be dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder, so PTSD, or have mood problems caused by depression or even bipolarity. So they may also be, another example, they may also be living with a psychotic condition such as like schizophrenia or problems related to attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, more commonly known as ADHD. So these are just some little examples to give you guys in our short time today. So signs to kind of look out for in the workplace. And in the middle of the screen here is an image of a person with one hand on their head and the other kind of wrapped around themselves. And they seem to be struggling, right? So some signs that a colleague is experiencing a mental health challenge. On the behavioral side, we can observe presenteeism, sorry. So that's just coming to work, but you're not actually working. You're not being functional. You're just being present. That's what we call presenteeism. Frequent tardiness or absences, a significant drop in productivity or motivation as well, increased social withdrawal or isolation, frequent conflicts with colleagues or management that they might not have had prior to, right? Signs of indecision or difficulty managing priorities, as well as an increase in errors or even workplace accidents. So even for myself, when I get a little overwhelmed, when I get stressed out, I happen to break things. I'm not usually clumsy. I just start like dropping things and they start to break. So that's when I know, okay, that's my sign. I need a timeout, right? So I can recognize that within myself as well. On the physical side, some clues that can be apparent are, kind of like an unkept appearance or unusual poor hygiene. And you're not comparing this person to another person, you're comparing this person to themselves, kind of like a before and an after, right? Signs of fatigue or exhaustion, or recurrent physical complaints about, headaches or muscle pain or feelings of discomfort. So for myself, when I get stressed out, I can actually feel the knots coming up my back and I'll feel really, really tense. And that's when I know that I've been enduring a lot of stress, right? So it is important to remember that, the appearance of these signs doesn't automatically mean that there's a mental health disorder or that there's a crisis going on in this person's life. They can have different causes, different meaning. But the important thing is to kind of just take a caring approach and open the door to discussion if you do notice several of these signs. Great. So just moving on to stigma and looking at what is stigma. So stigma refers to negative attitudes, beliefs, or behaviors towards, a group of people because of their personal circumstances. So this includes discrimination, prejudice, judgment, and stereotyping, which can isolate people who have mental who are experiencing mental health conditions or crises, right? And lack of mental health knowledge is what spreads fear and misinformation, right? We don't want to be labeling individuals and further perpetuating stereotypes. So what impact do you think, stigma has on people with mental health or, for example, substance use issues? Well, 75% of workers would be reluctant or unwilling to disclose their mental health issues to their employer or to their coworkers, right? So the language we use is very important when it comes to mental health. The words we use shape our view of the world and ourselves, right? So that's exactly what we kind of looked at with inclusive language. The words that we use and that we choose have specific meanings attached to them, right? And that would influence our decisions, our beliefs, our well-being. It'll impact how we interact with clients, if clients are coming in and shopping from your businesses, let's say. So we have a choice of the language we use to describe ourselves, our others, the business that you're running, or even the world around us. So we want to do it with caution. Okay. So this is just how to have kind of like a conversation if you do notice the signs that I've previously mentioned. So showing on the screen is just an image of two colleagues sitting at a table talking to each other. So if you think someone on your team, or even someone in your circle, perhaps if it's family, is suffering from poor mental health, on that continuum we talked about, or if they even start to mention it to you about it, it's essential that you have a sensitive and supportive conversation with them about their needs. So this will then help you assess and introduce appropriate support or adjustments, right? To be able to effectively manage mental health, whether in the workplace or even if you wanted to take those skills within your family setting as well. So here are some 6 steps that are going to kind of guide you. There's before, the during, and after the conversation. So step 1 here is planning. So when you notice that a colleague, an employee, or even a family member is kind of going through a difficult time, it's essential to kind of plan your conversation, right? Prepare what you want to say to them. If it's work related, you might want to document your concerns with concrete examples. So you might say, I've noticed that you're having trouble getting to work on time. Is there anything I can do to help you, right? Also, just take the time to learn about the resources available, whether in your business, in the community, or online. And remember the importance of body language as well whenever you're having this conversation. So you want to be respectful. Open posture can really go and make all the difference, right? Next step is to set a date or a time. So make an appointment, right? Choose a quiet, neutral place away from distractions, away from other employees or other family members. You want to give the person your full attention. Make sure to put away your phone, your computer, anything else business related, because this moment must be thought of as a real exchange, not just a box that you're checking and saying, okay, I checked on them, they're fine, right? Even if it's a virtual conversation you're having, you want to let the person know that the conversation is taking place in a safe space and that they can sit in private and discuss anything that they might need to. The next one that comes with that is talking about privacy and confidentiality. So from the beginning, we want to be clear about the limits. So you can't promise to keep everything to yourself, especially if this is work related, especially if the safety of the person or the safety of others is at stake, right? That's kind of when you have a duty to report. But other than that, you can be, you can give them their privacy and be confidential, right? So it's just kind of important to um, set that tone up front. Next one is addressing the first person. Or the person first. You want to use phrases like, I noticed that you seem tired or preoccupied lately, right? I'm worried about your productivity. How can I help you, right? You don't want to do the blame game or put your assumptions on them. You're just saying, I noticed this, right? And then in response to whatever they're saying, you want to kind of do the opposite, and you want to not say, oh, I understand, right? Because in theory, everybody has their own experiences, and you definitely don't want to bring up your own problems while they're talking about theirs. It's not really a contest. It's not really kind of like the right time to be comparing either, and it might put them off from sharing further, right? Before last step here we have is questions to ask and to avoid. So a couple little examples. You want to make sure you have open-ended questions. So how are you doing right now? Right? Very open-ended, not are you okay? Because are you okay? They'll just say yes or no, right? So how are you doing right now is a better alternative. Even have you talked to someone or sought help? Right? Or you can also ask, what could help you concretely, right? If this is in the workplace. And then finally, the last stage here, the last step is to kind of follow up. And the follow up is really essential. So after the conversation, write a short follow up message if possible. And if it's a family member, maybe a short follow up text. If it's work related, maybe a follow up email. But just write down kind of like the next steps that you might have discussed. Who does what needs to be done to support the person. And it just goes to show your commitment, helps build a lasting relationship of trust as well between colleagues. Okay. So on the screen here, you can kind of just see a screenshot of people's legs and feet, and they're all standing in a line here. So we're going to take a look at some examples of accommodation that employers, entrepreneurs such as yourselves, could offer your employees, or that you as an employee can ask your employer for. So looking at flexible schedule and start times, listening to music to help with concentration, offer instructions both in writing as well as verbally, changing the location of the office, create written checklists for completing tasks, organize weekly supervision verification meetings if that's needed, change the frequency of breaks, prepare an assigned quiet space in the office for people to decompress. And then you can even offer like a hybrid work model if that's something that's possible. And actually, for all of these accommodations, it's all based off of what's possible within your workplace. If you never ask, you never know. And if you're the boss and you have a workplace, or if you're an entrepreneur and you're doing this out of your home, then some things may not be applicable, right? So on this slide, we see two people sitting with two bubbles kind of above their head, kind of just showing their thoughts. And the title reads, Psychological Safety at Work. So a big part of what makes an inclusive work environment truly inclusive to everyone is its psychological safety. So psychological safety at work means that people are able to feel free to express themselves without any fear of negative consequences, like embarrassment or repercussions at work, right? So in other words, psychological safety means feeling comfortable taking risks, right? Taking the risk to share and talk about your ideas, or if you're struggling with mental health, if you're looking for second opinions, or if you're working on a project, right? You just want to be able to share all of this openly at work. So psychological safety in the workplace is based on three key pillars. One is preventing bias, two is promoting health, and three is resolving incidents and concerns as needed. So some strategies to be able to promote psychological safety in the workplace is you want to focus on promoting a culture where mistakes are seen as learning opportunities rather than failures, right? You also want to look at encouraging leaders such as yourselves, especially if you're in a management position or if you have your own business as entrepreneurs. That's what you are, you're leaders. But you just want to work on encouraging leaders, whether that's others or yourself, to show vulnerability and share your own experiences and challenges as well. And then you also want to look at offering flexible work options, telecommuting, flexible hours, if that's applicable. So maintaining a good work-life balance is really essential for maintaining our mental health and well-being as well. So a couple simple but effective strategies as we're kind of wrapping up is to create a clear transition between work and home, right? So even if you're working from home, if you're an entrepreneur and you're running your business out of your home, it's important to kind of signal your brain that the workday is over. So if you're done with work, go take a short walk. Maybe leave that space, do like a crossword puzzle or something else. Even listening to music can just help to mark that break before moving on to your evening routine, moving on to family, dinner, and everything else, right? You also want to reevaluate your tasks. So it doesn't have to be all on your shoulders. As like the firstborn, I feel this one a lot, but you want to identify what's essential and what can be delegated, right? And what else can you just simply let go, right? So this is a concrete way to reduce unnecessary stress. And then lastly, on this slide here, I have move a little each day. So exercising, even for just 15 minutes, can really kind of make a difference. Even if it's just a walk outside, even if it's just pulling up a little yoga YouTube video or just doing some stretching, just that movement can really help to kind of clear your mind, decrease the tension in your body, and just improve overall energy. So the important thing here is to find what works for you and to make small, consistent gestures that promote your balance on a daily basis. So these were some at-home tips. And now to just quickly go over some at-work tips. We have take regular breaks throughout the day. 10-minute break every 2 hours, maybe. It might not seem like much, but it really improves concentration and efficiency. Plan your day in advance. So before you end your day, take a few minutes to kind of recap, set your priorities for the next day. Make sure your goals are realistic, though, for the time that you have and the resources that you have. Next, we have manage emails smartly. So try to respond to emails only once or twice a day. Otherwise, you're going to be there responding back and forth to emails all day and you won't have any other work being done, right? And then what does that do for your mental health when you feel like you haven't accomplished any tasks that were on your to-do list, right? And then lastly here, we have protect your personal boundaries. So even if you're passionate about your work, you have to know how to turn it off, right? Turn off notifications when you're outside work hours and don't feel like you have to be available all the time, right? So these habits just go to help preserve your mental energy, your mental health, and just prevent you being overworked. Okay. So on the screen here is an image of kind of like a wavy, squiggly line, and the title reads, Healing is not linear. So it's important to know that the path to recovery from, let's say, really poor mental health is possible, but it's going to be different for every person. So healing is non-linear, right? It's important to remember that a person living with, let's say, a chronic illness or poor mental health, it's important to know to continue to support and accommodate the employee, the colleague, let's say it's a family member, or even if it's yourselves as entrepreneurs, and give everyone grace throughout their journey to do this, right? And that kind of concludes our kind of little webinar for today. Thank you to everyone for attending. I'm not sure if there are any questions. We might have a couple minutes. If not, please feel free to send your questions to get in touch with Karen and Gina at No Beep, and I'll be more than happy to then follow up with you all.
Thank you so much, Daphne, for this insightful and engaging presentation. And thank you to all for you who joined us and participated in the conversation. Is there any questions? We can take maybe one question before we conclude.
Yeah, I know I talk a lot and I know I talk fast. I'm really used to, talking about the material and the content. We do presentations quite often. So it's possible that questions might come to you later on in the evening. So please feel free again to reach out to Karen or Gina. Feel free to have a look at our Eventbrite page. You can see kind of the other training if you're interested in. If you see something that or if you don't see what you're looking for, if you're interested in something a little bit more unique, something a little bit more tailored to businesses and entrepreneurs, get in touch with Karen and Gina and they'll let me know. And we're going to throw another one of these webinars for you all.
Okay. Thank you again, Daphne. We hope that you're living with practical tools and new perspective on how inclusive leadership and mental health awareness can strengthen your business and workplace. So as a reminder, the recording of this session will be available soon on our YouTube channel and through our website at snowbeep.ca. And the French version will take place on June 3rd. At the same time, feel free to share the info with your Francophone network. If you have any question, like Daphne said, you can direct them to us at info@nobit.ca, or you can, if you know Daphne, you can go ahead and send her the questions. And I wish you a great day and thank you again for being here